You heard about the man in the middle attacks, but today I'll tell you about the man in the disk attacks.
Ganesh, last week during Black Hat, one of the talks I did not get to attend was one about an Android vulnerability that they're calling man in the disk. Anything you can share with that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's another new type of attack which piqued my interest. Basically, MITD is a man in the disk attacks, similar to man in the middle. But in this case, it's targeting the most of the Android apps. So how is this possible? I think it's possible because the way Android OS deals with the storage. The apps on the Android OS can access and view any type of apps on the external storage. Basically, that gives leverages, and maybe unwanted advantage, maybe not necessary privileges to look at the other apps. So in this case, a few researchers from Checkpoint, they did some malicious app development to study how this could be done. What they did is they created I think a flashlight app, posing to be a flashlight app with some code stolen and basically hidden inside the app. In one case, what they did is basically they asked the permission from the users to access the external storage. If I'm a user, if I need to use the app, I'm not thinking about what it is going to ask. I will just give the app the permissions to install.
And you probably assume that one app that's stored in external storage is not necessarily going to be able to interfere with another one. Most people wouldn't think that.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, that's a normal request for permission that write external storage. It's pretty normal from a permission perspective. People just give it. They don't think twice about granting that permission.
That's true, especially if it's something benign like a flashlight app. You wouldn't think twice. I think the key thing here is basically by using the external disk, either it's an SD card, it may be some sort of logical file system, they could able to manipulate the storage space.
Right. And so I was kind of reading through, I was kind of scrolling down here because the interesting thing to me about it is that Google or the Android security guidelines, they actually have some good guidelines about how you should, best practices about using external storage, such as, perform input validation when you're handling data from external storage, do not store executables or class files at external storage, and then external storage files should be signed and cryptographically verified prior to dynamic loading. All three of which, if they had done that, the apps probably wouldn't be vulnerable to this, but a lot of app developers aren't doing that kind of, validations or best practices when they write their apps. App developers, they need to be a little bit more diligent about following best practices about how to deploy when they use external storage in the Android operating system, how to do that in a safe way. I haven't heard of any kind of patching or anything for this, but
actually there are a couple of apps actually vulnerable to it. Few from Google, a few from Yandex. I think that's a Russian-based browser.
Right, very popular.
Very
Yandex,
popular. Yeah. But I think when the researchers went back to Google, they released actually a patch to address these vulnerabilities.
Okay.
But in the case of others, I don't think they decided to do it at this time. Probably near future, they may have some updates.
But it sounds like the apps themselves are updating to better follow these best practices as opposed to the core OS being modified in some way to prevent it from happening.
I'm assuming so.
It's documented behavior. I think that's the challenge. It's documented. This is how it's going to work. And so it's hard to change that behavior if that's the way it's supposed to work.
Right. Yeah, because you might break so many things in the process of trying to change something that's so basic in the underlying operating system. Could probably break a bunch of other apps that already exist that might rely on some feature of that for some legitimate reason. So, all right, good one to keep an eye out for. Hopefully we don't see a lot of rogue apps being side-loaded onto people's Android devices, causing this to happen, but we'll keep an eye on it.
Find some wood to knock, John.
All right, thanks, Ganesh.
Thank you.